Hello friends, I am so excited to share with you scenario-based interview questions from Deloitte Digital. Reason being these questions are toughest tricky questions I ever seen, and all these questions will test your practical experience as an agile practitioner. So friends, watch complete video till end with detailed explanation. Friends, please turn on captions for this video for better understanding. Before we get into interview questions, a very quick warm welcome from myself. My name is Sunandsharrma, that's me in the center of the screen. I am Agile consultant based in Den Haag, Netherlands. And I have helping people for the last 2 years to successfully pass their interviews. I always do that by giving you a top scoring real world interview questions with detailed answers you can't find anywhere else. Friends, please make sure you subscribe by clicking the button below the video. And then you won't miss out on any of the weekly videos I'm uploading. And I would also appreciate your support if you gave the video a like. Your one like is a big motivation for me because that's tell me you enjoy the content and I will create more for you. Thank you very much. Question number one. Let's imagine we are developing Microsoft Access. In the Microsoft Access, you can design an application and then you can run the application. Designing the application consists of defining the data model, the different UI views to access it. Running the application allows to browse and create data using the specific views. So in MS Access, the end users could be split into two roles. App designer, the users that design the application elements. App user, the user that connect to an application and use it to browse and create data. Let's say that MS Access product owner wants to add the support of card views in addition to the existing table views and form views. This feature could be materialized as two user stories. User story 1. As an app designer, I want to able to design card view for an application. User story 2. As an app user, I want to able to browse data using the card view. If one as a design instead of using the table view. The problem I see with having two separate stories is that user story 2 depends on user story 1 to be achievable. Thus break the eye of invest. User story 1 without user story 2 does not bring any real value. Releasing the product with only user story 1 would provide the capability to design card views that are useless without user story 2. The problem I see with merging them together is that the merged user story would be targeting two end user roles, which is bad practice. It would also make stories too large to be easily estimable in most cases. So what is the best approach to follow in such cases? Friends, pause for a minute, think about the question again, and try to find the answer. Okay, let me summarize. You are writing user stories for the team creating Microsoft Access, and you want to have the functionality to design a card view in the integrated development environment and have the card view render a certain base user of that application. And you have a much more elaborate situation. In this case, you do in fact have two user stories that are independent. This is a pretty common misinterpretation between something being potentially shippable and if you choose to release it. If you were to do user story first, you might think that is no value if users can't see the rendered version. But maybe you have a big developer conference next week and you are handling out a developer preview version of the software. Being able to show the design of the card view during a core session could be unbelievably of value. Or look at this at other way. User stories 2 seems like it needs user story 1 to be any use. But what if you can't import project from a previous version? Then user story 2 allows people to import a project that use card view from an old version and view it properly, even if they can't yet change the design. The best approach is to keep the stories separate. The two stories are not really that depend on each other, that they evaluate the I from invest. User story 2 may appears to depend on user story 1, but in reality, you don't need user story 1 to demonstrate user story 2. To demonstrate that user story can use a card view to browse the database only requires that some form of card view is available. It is not required that this card view can be created using the application, only that it somehow exists. Therefore, you can demonstrate user story 2 with one of the two hard-coded cards views and inform the stakeholders that there is another story underway to allow a user to create them. It is quite common that a story on its own only brings a very marginal benefit to the product, and that's the real benefit comes from a combination of stories. This is most visible when developing a new product, but also happens when extending an existing product. If you were to combine stories until they provide enough business value on their own, you might just as well go back to waterfall development as the stories would cover the entire product development. You also should not be deceived by the delivery you make at the end of a sprint. Your delivery a potential shippable product, this does not mean that it will be shipped to a customer, but only this if the product owner finds that the product has sufficient business value to actually ship, and then he can ship it without additional work from the development team being needed. A product with only one or two related stories, where both stories are needed to add the real value, most likely won't be shipped in that form. Next question. You are working with a technical component team. The team member have been writing a page or two with the things that they build. Not so much of a spec document as a definition of doc of what needs to be done. In there is a quite clear what the scope of the story is. This seems to be working with the team as there was no ambiguity on implementation. So the question is, what's the point of having acceptance criteria when you have defined in a design document what you want to done and how? So there is no one form for acceptance criteria. If your document describes what needs to be done in sufficient detail to write test against, then that document is your acceptance criteria. Keep in mind that a story has three parts: card, conversation, and confirmation. The card is a way to remind the team about the work. The conversation and any required notes or details that come out of those conversations help the team to work towards a solution. The confirmation is how you make sure that the work is done, often through automated test. There are different ways to capture what you need to be tested from the associated conversation. You should bear in mind that the acceptance may be a combination of functional and non-functional criteria. That's both what the solution delivers and how it delivers, which could be performance, capacity, reliability, maintainability, and so on. These should all be captured. If they all in the design spec, then you may not need separate acceptance criteria as per the original question. If these are not specified, then I would suggest that you create an acceptance document to avoid arguments along the line of, you never said it would have been a code with 20,000 simultaneous user, or I thought it would be obvious that the system should keep running through hardware upgrades, or even why did you build it with so much spare capacity. It's never going to need to handle more than 10,000 entries in the database. So just to avoid all these things, it's always good to have an acceptance criteria. You can, of course, use a design or requirement document as a basis of your acceptance criteria. No need to record that information again on a story if you already have it. However, change control can be difficult with documents. If your backlog changes and you create new stories, then you may want to hold on to the previous versions of your documents. It can be difficult for multiple people to edit the same document simultaneously while maintaining clarity about which version is relevant to a given story. For these reasons, many people resort to documents only when they have to, and otherwise rely on stories as a preferred place to put acceptance criteria. Next question. You work for a large program that deals with a lot of projects. A few at any given time are developed heavy, and you've been noticing developer get extremely burned out on a project. How can you avoid team burnout? I have found that burnout does not so much happen at a specific point, and it varies from person to person. For some, it's 300, 400 hours. For others, it might be 1,000 or 5,000 or more, as you know. So, regardless of the hours, burnout builds over time and reflect many things. Without knowing the specific from both yourself and your team, I would suggest the following as areas to examine and focus on. A lot of things that can make a difference are intangible, but they adds up. So very first point is listen first. Ask your team, ask again. Ask every week what I can do to help you. It's my job. So seek first to understand and then to be understood. Be honest. Programmers, they can sniff out falseness very quickly and it's very demotivating for them. Encourage, reward and promote developers who want to use best practices. Give developers as much autonomy as possible. Allow mistakes when not critical. So give developers variety in the projects they are working on concurrently. Provide general training. Developers need to continue improving skills in a variety of areas to stay current. Provide specific trainings. Developers need to skills to do a specific task at hand, or they are forced to learn on the job, reducing the time to do the job, which is frustrating and stressful sometimes. Send developers to conferences in relevant technologies. They improve their skills and you can be benefit out of it. Address technical debt, understand it and acknowledge it publicly with your tech team and with management when it exists. Spread knowledge about why it is bad and better practices to address and avoid it. Technical debt can be very discouraging to your best developer. Encourage a good attitude and lead by example. Go to training yourself on better management. Acknowledge, praise, and encourage good work by your team. Use humor where is possible to diffuse the tension in difficult situations. Give developers variety in the technologies they are using to keep them fresh. Provide quality equipments and tools. Give people tools they find a pleasure to use, not a pain and frustration. Keep a constant supply of tools, technologies, and toys. The kind of developers you may want often love this stuff more than money. Encourage your developers to specialize in technologies they are most interested and enjoy. Seek out and implement technologies that automate repetitive tasks such as running tests, building code stacks. Use tools that report on code quality and use the output from these tools to be guide and help on making better quality code. So the case for doing so does not have to just be a conversation. States can be powerful. The other important thing which we can do, provide a great workplace that encourage developer to come into the office rather than work remotely with the different snacks and all. Provide quality workstation and quality chairs. Provide the option of stand-up desk with some enjoyment. Cardboards, different things can be available. Provide multiple big screen for each developer and a big visible charts screen to show rotating images of key indicator. Encourage different breaks. Find some fun activities both for team and inter teams. Respect people habits. Some folks need peace and quiet sometimes. Others don't notice noise forever. Examine the team makeup. Is one member constantly toxic? Encourage healthy habits with gym memberships, on-premise site shower for accessible commutes, healthy snacks. Because at the end, it's healthy body equal to healthy brain and less time. If there is a lot of bureaucracy or slowness in the organization, avoid boredom by compensating for a downtime with a variety of other work education. Developers working with users sometimes have conflict due to different perspective and areas of expertise. Encourage greater communication to address this. Use good tools for project features bug tracking, and that is example pivotal tracker. Pick a tool that your team find easy and helpful to use. Agree on the usage pattern and appropriate naming categorization of issues. Define the workflow with clear meetings, communication messages. Make sure everyone is on the same page as to what the direction is. Don't assume they are. Address issues with the regular scheduled meetings and never assume that everything is okay. Let's move on to the next question. Is it possible to be agile during steps prior to implementation, like sales and product discovery? So, our product is a user facing portal that displays data from multiple sources. It can take several months to display data from a new source. The steps involved are business and legal agreement with the new source, discovery to define how they will connect to our system, building the interface technical infrastructure, negotiating about collecting, analyzing and transforming the data to meet the portal standards, and finally displaying it. So, how to be agile when there is a massive amount of sales, pre-work, product discovery to be done before actual implementation? How you are going to implement Agile Scrum? Because the pre-work necessary to deliver value to the customer is something the customer does not care about. Pre-work cannot be tracked as user story. Shall we use task? But then tasks cannot be assigned points, so how can they be tracked? Should we use Kanban instead of Scrum? Then what will be the purpose of sprints? By hiding pre-work or attempting to bury it inside some other attribute of the work, we are actively harming communications and active collaboration with the customer. How can the customer possibly make informed business decision or trust in the process if, like an iceberg, most of the real project is hidden below the surface? So let's not do that. While it's true that most customers won't care about the particulars of product development, it's extremely important that they are able to see if feature is difficult to implement or require a high level of efforts in areas that don't directly deliver value. The stakeholders must see that when this currently hidden work is surface and visible, stakeholders can make better informed decisions about what features they value, what resources they can bring to the bear, what processes they can improve or impediments they can remove, and whether the cost benefit or return on the investment is still worth it after evaluating the full measure of work involved. Scrum is not just about completing product backlog items, it's about completing the right user stories and constantly re-evaluating the process and the priorities. Maybe a task is not a user story, and a user story is not necessarily a shapeable feature. In this specific case, we are allowing our tool to dictate our process. Let's not do that. Most customers primarily care about potentially shapeable value, not necessarily features. While a great user story represents a vertical slice of the value to the viewpoint character in the story, it may or may not be a shapeable increment on its own. Instead, the team should focus on the increment delivered by each sprint, which is generally captured by a sprint goal. Each sprint need not result in a formal release. It simply must deliver a potential shippable increment of value. There are cases when multiple sprints are needed to reach an agile release milestone. That's okay, but we can't measure our progress towards that release unless you are tracking all the value added steps needed to get there. In this case, value added does not inherently mean customer facing. It simply means work that adds value to the product and works that is essential to the development of the product. And the work that is essential to the development of the product adds value too. Most product features will have a lot of preconditions. When possible, vertical slices that fit within a single sprint are idle. That's not always possible. In such cases, we capture the feature as an epic and then build themes and user stories that will collectively deliver the epic. In particular, user stories, coherent bit of product development that meets invest criteria, contribute to the current sprint goal, fits within a single sprint. If you have a story or epic, such as display data from a Fox News, that won't fit into a single sprint, then you need to decompose the work into measurable increments that do fit, and that work should be visible to both the team and the stakeholder. The development team might then decompose this into some low effort tasks. Some examples might be to request the corporate counsel write a contract for Fox News, validate that the contract has been sent to the Fox News by the last day of the current sprint, add a story to the product backlog to follow up on the contract status in a future sprint. In reality, these sorts of stories are often like zero point 0.5 to 2 story points because the level of efforts for the development team is quite low. There's basically a conversation that needs to be held, resources to be requested, or tracking activities to be performed. And you are not tracking the lead time or cycle time of the task, but rather the level of efforts required by the members of the development team. With that in mind, most of the stuff you are defined as pre-work definitely belongs on the product backlog because it needs to be tracked by the stakeholders and by the project. However, I suspect most of the pre-work stories represent dependencies for the work for the development team, rather than high efforts work the team must do itself. Whether you make each contract request a user story in its own right, or whether you bundle up a bunch of similar tasks into a user story like request all current contract, it's up to you and your stakeholders. Finding the right level of granularity is an art, but visibility, transparency, communication, and collaboration are the guiding principles that can help you define the optimum label for your particular project. Next question. You have joined a team where the development is happening at offshore location. Offshore team looks disengaged and not able to meet the sprint commitment. How do we provide more freedom to the offshore teams to decide, but also trust that they do the best they can without compromising product delivery? If we want to establish a good relationship with the offshore team, then I would suggest few of the things. Meet the teams in person, either onshore or offshore. Establish a relationship with them and gain an understanding of what is motivating their behavior is very important. General social relations. If visits is not easy to do, still on chat, on phone, you need to have a social relationship with them. You need to talk and discuss and stay close. Build mutual trust. It is not just about you trusting your offshore team. It is also about offshore team trusting you. If they think they are being judged or blamed, then they are likely to be defensive. Empower the team. Help them to get engaged in design and architecture. Make them feel like their inputs is valued. Proactive behaviors come when people feel they have value. Try and break the distinction between the onshore and offshore teams. Make sure meetings are held jointly, including retrospective. Use chat programs like Slack or MS Teams. Arrange your daily scrim at a time when everyone can be involved, regardless of location. And in the last, thanks email. After a major release, that recognition of team effort email does a motivation magic and get people really feeling proud of their accomplishment. Friends, that's all for part 1 of this video. Please subscribe for the second part. Thanks. Have a nice day.